Thank you very much, Carlo. Thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you to the hotel for providing a really fantastic venue. Thank you to the weather gods for, I think, 2 days of what's going to be absolutely glorious. Thank you to you guys for actually coming into the room. I was in the sea about an hour ago, and it occurred to me that it'd probably be better to stay there, both for me and for you. But also thank you for coming, because there really is a tremendous amount of talent, intelligence, wisdom in the audience and in the hotel right now. We have a feast of knowledge and information ahead of us. I'm also aware of the fact that we have a literal feast very shortly after this, so I'm going to go quickly. I am a lawyer, and it is true in the United States that judges give harsher sentences before lunch than they do after lunch. So I'm well aware of the fact that you guys are judging me right now on empty stomachs. So I'll be quick. What am I talking about today? The title says Transforming the Digital Agency Market, but actually what I'm talking about is bringing innovation to the world. Innovation Island is an appropriate title for us right now because we're on an island. But actually what we don't want is islands of innovation. We want a world of innovation. So how do we do that? There are brilliant ideas out here. I don't really have any brilliant ideas myself. What I want to do is help you guys bring your ideas to the world. So how do you do that is the question for this talk. If you're giving a presentation to strangers, the best thing to do is to talk about what you know well, and what I know well is myself. What I don't know well is how to work my clicker. Here we go. So what I know well is myself. So I'm going to start out talking about myself. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about my company. I know that's not what you guys are here for, so I'm going to spend only 95% of the talk on those two topics. Probably an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, if that's okay. And if you guys are able to sit through that, I'm going to reward you by talking about, ladies and gentlemen, you. We'll finish the topic talking about you guys. So, my favorite subject, me. I grew up in California. You think, okay, that's why someone is here to talk about innovation. I grew up in San Francisco, went to law school in Silicon Valley. I think of my high school class, probably half of them either have startups or are in, you name it, Twitter, Google, Facebook, YouTubes of the world. If you grew up in the Bay Area, you could not help but be around this, have it banged on your head all the time. And so a lot of people went into the tech industry. I did not. I wanted to be a surfer. I thought that was a lot more fun. I thought I was better at it. Turns out I wasn't. Not good enough to be a professional surfer. Surfing is really great because it's one of the best areas for looking really, really cool until you actually do it. So when you walk across a beach with a surfboard, you look amazing, only to disappoint everybody who's watching you when you get into the waves and they just hit you in the face and you drown and you're coughing a little bit. So anyways, I wasn't good enough to be a surfer. So like most failed surfers, I became a finance lawyer. If you want to do international finance at really the highest level, you should be qualified in New York, which I was, or you should be qualified in the United Kingdom. And I decided I wanted to be the best lawyer I could be, so I did both. Became an English solicitor too. I practiced my posh accent, and that was a good combination. I was able to do deals all over the world. That's about 5 years of work. Hard to see the countries up there because it's sort of washed out a bit, but it's lots of countries. And what I think I'm actually more proud of is it's not just geographically diverse, it's diverse in terms of companies. You have banks up there, oil and gas companies, retail chains, airports, roads, a whole range of different types of businesses that I was able to have as clients. So my real expertise is how do you develop clients all over the world? And you need three things really. The first is you need talent, or you need to be able to fake it. I'm not going to talk about that so much. But the next thing is you need the actual logistics to meet people in that many places. And that's tough. How do you meet a client in Chile if you're in Croatia or if you're in London? Next, after that, if you've met them, you need the cross-cultural communication skills to be able to develop and maintain a strong relationship with that client. And I think some of us who've sold products, who've sold services, know that sometimes that client relationship matters a lot more than the actual quality of the product or the service. So how do you do that? So the first is the logistics. Here's where my company comes into play. We're in the Croatian market, and sorry, that's wrong. Croatian market, a little bit smaller. Croatia is part of the European market, which is bigger. Then you have the US market, which is also really, really big. So if you want to be in those markets, let's be in the US market too. Can we also get into the Asian market? Awesome. If you've hit all of those markets, you might as well fill in the rest and get the world. Now, no disrespect to Africa, Americas, Australia. I just didn't have room for bigger font sizes. And also no disrespect to Antarctica and the poles, missed you too. But really the idea is to get the world. So how can you guys bring the great innovative ideas, the technologies, the companies that you all run, how can you bring those services to the world? Well, you should be able to, right? Because the world is becoming digitized. Or that's wrong. It is digitized. So we should be able to do that. And companies need our services. Whatever it is in the digital field, could be digital marketing. How do I use artificial intelligence technology? How do I use blockchain technology? How do I use cryptocurrencies? There's a whole range of technologies that companies need. Huge demand. There's also huge supply, a proliferation of digital agencies offering a range of these services all over. Small ones to big ones, everywhere. And you'd think in a digitized world, we'd have a really vibrant market where people are competing based on quality and based on price. And that's it. But I also teach at a university here, and one of my co-professors had written extensively on the difficulties that Croatian digital agencies have getting out of the country. How does a Croatian digital agency develop clients in the United States, in South Africa, wherever? We have Crescio from Neurolab has done that very successfully. But for a lot of the others, it's really, really difficult. Why? Why is it difficult? The answer is there actually isn't an efficient way for the massive supply to meet the massive demand. And I want to break that down a little bit. So I was talking to my university a couple days ago. It's a university in Zagreb. They were trying to attract students from the Netherlands and from other countries around Europe. And so they need digital marketing in those countries. And so I said, how are you going to find a digital marketing agency in the Netherlands or in Portugal or in Spain? And the answer I got was personal network. We're going to ask our digital marketing agency in Croatia, who do you know in Portugal? Who do you know in the Netherlands? Who do you know in Spain? And that is, I think, for obvious reasons, terribly inefficient. Because the person that they may suggest may be bad, they may be too expensive, maybe they're suggesting them for a whole bunch of other reasons, maybe it's just their buddy. This is not really the best way, I think, to find a business partner in the modern world. And yet, this is how most of us do it. Okay, the world's digitized, so let's go to Google. We can Google it, but I think the rest of us know when you Google something, how many results do you get? 50 million. How many pages do you go through? Not that many. It's a really blunt tool to look for something really specific. We had a member from the Google team in Croatia talking to us about how infrequently people actually get to the second page of a search. So again, this is not a really efficient way to find what you're looking for, a very specific business partner who has the right quality and the right price and the right delivery of the type of service you want. So if search engines aren't delivering it, what's the final place for you to go? And there are a few listing sites and there are consultants out there. When I grew up in California, we had something called the Yellow Pages. If you need a plumber, it's a giant book. You open up the Yellow Pages, you go through plumbers, and you get a list. That stuff is now online. You can get a kind of Yellow Pages of digital agencies online. But the problem is these are also not efficient. You get a long list. You don't know who still exists. You don't know if they're good. You don't know if they do what you want to do. You don't know if their price is right for you. And it turns out the business models of these listing agencies is to put the people at the top who've paid the most to be there. So again, not a terribly efficient way to find a business partner. This is where we come in. We're trying to be different. And I actually don't want to talk about us too much because I'll have a chance to talk about the organization more. Our CEO, Goran, is here as well. Goran, wave your hand. I'll talk about him more in the presentation. We're trying to be in the middle. In truth, we're trying to be a dating agency, like Tinder for digital agencies. If you're a digital agency, you build a profile. You can make yourself look as pretty as you possibly can. And then if you're a company, you can go through them and search for them. The second part that makes us very different is that if you're a company who's looking for services, you can leave a request for services on our platform. Our platform sorts the types of digital agencies that have actual verified experience in this area and lets them know that there's an RFP out there. that they can apply for. The idea is, if you're a digital agency in Croatia and you see a request for services in San Francisco, it does not matter that you don't show up on Google. It does not matter that you're not part of that personal network. It does not matter that you didn't show up on that listing site. You can apply directly to that company and you can compete on price and quality. And that's the idea that we have. I think why it's exciting and why I'm talking about it tonight is that this is also your story too. Because if it's successful, then every one of us can be doing business all over the world in a variety of ways without some of the difficulties that we talked about before. So that's us. We do lots of cool, innovative things. We have gamification. We have a whole range of cool little innovative ideas that I'd like to talk to you about, and so would our team, but we're a little bit late for dinner, so I'm gonna scoot through. Okay, if you are part of the story too, we should probably talk about you. And I mean you, all of you guys. So, Thomas Friedman, a famous guy, he's written a book called The World is Flat. This is Tom. He's really perfected his I look really smart look. If you want to be an intellectual, if you want to speak at conferences, you really need to work on this picture. It's got to be good. And we worked on mine a lot. This is, I don't know how many pictures. I canvassed my students. They said, you look fake. I asked my wife. She said, you look fat. I do a little bit. You sort of see the neck. Either way, Tom's got a really good picture. And he also has good things to say. He's written that no matter what your profession is, you better be good at the touchy-feely service stuff, because anything that can be digitized, there's that word again, can be outsourced. And he said that in 2005. And here he goes, leave it to a professor to come to a conference on innovation and quote something that's 15 years old. But Thomas Friedman was right, though. There is a problem. There is a cultural barrier, a touchy-feely service stuff barrier to us finding clients all over the world. And that problem in a picture is him. This is Tashi. Tashi is from Tibet. And Tashi is sticking his tongue at you in form of greeting. And lots of people do this. He did it too. But Tashi is doing it to say hello. And the question is, why? Lots of actual stories about why this is true. But actually in Tibet, the story goes, at some point there was either an evil dictator or a conqueror who came in, and this person was possessed by a demon, and the way you could tell is that his tongue was black. So now in Tibet, you stick your tongue out at people to show that you're not possessed by a demon. So I don't know if anybody's read The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, but we're all stuck on an island together, so just to make sure there are no demons, and we are going to do icebreakers later, but just to make sure there are no demons, check around, look around, cool. Goran, the CEO of my company, used to be a boxer. And if you came up to Goran before I gave this talk and stuck your tongue at him, he might punch you in the face. So you need to have some sort of cultural intelligence when you communicate with people. Fortunately, there are lots of people out there that tell us how to do it. The guy in the middle, Richard Lewis, he founded Berlitz. He's written lots of books on how to communicate with different cultures. The guy on the left, Hofstede, is a Dutch management theorist. He worked in IBM. He went around IBM's offices and looked at how different cultures within IBM, organizational cultures within IBM are different across different worlds, across different countries. He said there are 5 cultural dimensions that determine how we behave. The guy on the far right, he's an academic too, and this is a secret in the world of academia. If somebody before you has written that there are 5 dimensions, what do you need to do? You need to write that there are more. He said, no, Hofstede's wrong. There's 9, I think. Is it 9, Tomagoy? He said there are 9. I don't like these dimensions very much. They're a little bit impractical, a little bit fuzzy. So there is someone out there that I think really knows what he's talking about. I respect him a great deal. And he has a bunch of really practical tips on how to communicate with different cultures. And that person is me. So what are my 5 rules of cross-cultural communication? The first is don't make a fool of yourself. We break that rule all the time. I'm breaking it right now. The second is pay attention to cultural noise. And I'll talk about what that is in a second. And the third is, and the hardest one, is establish trust. How do you do that with different cultures in different businesses? It's incredibly important in any industry. How do you do it? So the first one, don't make a fool of yourself. No stupid pictures of yourself on a presentation. For that matter, don't give presentations if you are, as my wife says, an idiot. But to be a little bit more practical, pay attention to verbal and nonverbal communication. So the verbal communication, we all know. If you're speaking a different language, make sure you know the language or you have a good translator. There's a great story that I tell in my classes of during the Iranian hostage crisis, a UN negotiator got off the plane in Tehran and he said, "Don't worry everybody, I am here as a mediator to negotiate a resolution to this crisis. A compromise is the word he used." And the translation turned out to be pretty bad because the direct translation in Farsi for mediator is more like a meddler, someone who should not be there, who's bothering everybody. And the direct translation for the compromise that he used is actually an agreement that you don't want to do. So the story, the soundbite that everyone got is that here's this foreigner who shouldn't be in a place that he is, trying to get everyone to do something that they don't want to do. So you need to pay attention to the language. But this is the digital world. So what are the nonverbal things that we can do to mess up communication? And this is where I have fun with my students. One of my students is from Albania, and he told me halfway through the class that this means something really rude in Albania. United States, it means you're doing okay. And so there'd been a massive miscommunication between me and him every time he'd said, yeah, your lectures are like this. But even more fun than that is this, fingers crossed. In the United States, this is kind of like a good luck thing. I hope we get it, good luck. In Vietnam, the fingers crossed means the crossed legs of a woman. It actually refers to a woman's private parts. So if you're in a meeting in Vietnam and you say, I hope we get it, you've said something that's entirely different from what you were trying to say. So it's cool to pay attention to those things. As a lawyer, we get emails where we have to pay attention to cultural stuff. We were doing a deal, we were selling oil and gas drilling rights to a field in Nigeria. We were negotiating a very touchy part of the deal. And so we sent an email to our guy on the ground in Nigeria. We said, as you do in these types of negotiations, you say, dear so-and-so, we have the following 10 points. We need to know our position on these 10 points before we go back into the room. So, point 1, he responds. Point 2, he responds. Point 3, he responds. Point 4, we got what I can only imagine are the search terms for the most lewd pornography you can imagine. All sorts of stuff. Animals, sisters, nuns, not the kind of thing that you would expect. And we had a good laugh about this, but then we realized there's a cultural problem here because this guy is in Nigeria. His name is Muhammad. He's a devout Muslim from northern Nigeria. How do we deal with the cultural implications of this fact? We're lawyers. We can't maybe ignore the fact that either our guy has maybe compromised some data or just lost it. How do we deal with it? And that's tough. I'll tell you how we dealt with it over dinner, but it's hard. The next thing is cultural norms. So the good news is you can read about these cultural things. You've got the cultural theorists, and you can learn as much as you can about a country. The problem is the things that we tend to learn end up not being the right stuff to talk about. So my wife is from Croatia. Whenever we go to the United States, what do my friends know about Croatia? Not a great deal, but they know about the war. So every time my wife goes to the United States, the first 20 minutes of every conversation is about the war, which is not an ideal conversation topic if you're trying to establish a relationship. And that sounds easy to do. Just don't talk about touchy things like the war. But I was in a meeting in Madrid, big oil and gas company, sitting across the table from a guy from Barcelona and a guy from Madrid. We're having lunch, and I'm trying to make conversation. What do we know about Barcelona and Madrid? Well, they've got two football teams that don't like each other, and at the time, Barcelona was also trying to secede from Spain. So you want to show how much you know. You want to talk about these things, but again, maybe not the right thing to talk about. So we have someone coming from Scotland. Should we talk about Brexit? Probably not. I'm from the States. Should we talk about Trump? Maybe not. You don't know exactly where I stand on those various issues. And the problem is we like to show people of different cultures how much we know. And what we know tends to be in the news, and the news is negative. That's hard. Next thing is to pay attention to cultural noise. What's cultural noise? Another academic term. It's basically the background stuff that's hovering around that influences the way we generate meaning. When you see me, you're seeing other cultural things. The way I'm dressed, my gender, all these things. I used it right off the bat. I told you I was a California surfer. Now, many of you have probably not met a California surfer, but you've definitely seen one on TV, right? So I immediately slid into some of those stereotypes. And for me, they're positive. I'm trying to show you I'm cool. Then I talk about being a lawyer. Not many of you have met a New York finance lawyer before, but you've definitely seen one on TV. You've seen Harvey Specter. So I can slide into those things, and it's great, unless they're bad. So what is the bad cultural noise in your life? I've done work in the Middle East. I was in Morocco immediately after the United States invaded Iraq. It was a bad time for a white American male to be in the Arab world. That's cultural noise. How do I deal with it? How do I use it? Especially if you're an idiot. The next thing, and the hardest one, is to establish trust. And this is where culture really does matter. This is a great study that they did where they looked at different countries. In some places, it's harder to establish trust than in others. In Nordic countries, Canada, US, and Britain, it's a little bit easier to get people to trust you. People are more predisposed to trust. In other countries, our immediate neighbor up north, Slovenia, a little bit harder. So you've got to deal with that. People have different recommendations. Helen Jareski is a cultural management theorist that I like very much. She has a bunch of suggestions. These are all very practical. Rubin is another famous theorist on how to generate trust. He says, show empathy, show an open orientation to knowledge, not believing that your way is right, believing that other people's ways can also be right. But again, this is a little bit harder. I prefer practical stuff. So what are my rules for establishing trust that work everywhere? The first is care about the client. If you're doing a deal with a client, maybe you're seeing a certain portion of that. Maybe you're designing a website for them or a platform, or you're helping them with AI. But the rest of their business is much bigger. Show that you care about that too. If we're doing a deal with a client and we're not paying attention to what's going on outside of the range of what we're talking about, people notice that. They think we're hyper-focused on the business connection. What we should be focused on is them, their business in general. The next is, and this is simple, respond quickly. We had a rule in my law firm, respond within 20 minutes. Every email you get from 7 in the morning to midnight, respond within 20 minutes. And that's a little bit crazy. Turns out it's a lot easier done than you think. All you do is you say thanks for the note and respond. But it's a little bit crazy. The point being, if you're dealing with a client on the opposite side of the world, they shoot off an email, they don't know what's happened to it. Where has it gone? I'm sending it to Scott in London. He's a faceless individual. If I respond immediately, even if it's a nothing email, thanks, Goran, for your note, I'll get back to you. That takes 2 seconds, but they've gotten that immediately. And you can very, very quickly establish a trust there that you're actually working on their behalf just through that simple email. What's even better is using the phone. Pick up the phone. We hide behind the phone behind email very often, but if you actually want to generate a trusting relationship with someone, use the phone, because then you can use humor. Then you don't get in trouble with sarcasm over email. And lastly, promote your references. And this is where I get back to Top Digital Agency. The system that we have is designed upon trying to show the work that you've done in other places. So if I'm trying to tell you that I'm great at something, that I'm a great surfer, it doesn't work very well if I tell you that. But if somebody else does, and they say, yeah, Scott's a great surfer, then you're more inclined to believe me, more inclined to trust me. So seek out platforms like ours or others where people can show that you've done good work too, that it's not just you showing it. So these are fairly simple rules. There's nothing really innovative here, actually, but they make a huge difference in your ability to develop relationships with clients and to keep them. Use the platform. Love to talk to you guys about it. We're launching the full platform in a few weeks. Our developer is here also, so we've got a lot of technical knowledge to talk about it. And have a great time this weekend. Thanks very much.